Hi, my name's David. Today I'm going to give you an overview, not every detail, but an overview of installing a Furuno NAVpilot 711C Autopilot. Our boat is 32 feet, it has cable steering, so your setup will be a little bit different if you have hydraulic steering. And we're going to use the most basic, simple setup for this Autopilot. So for example, it will not have GPS. I'll show you the three configurations in the next shot here. Okay, Furuno will give you a sheet that outlines several things. One is connecting to your processor, but then we'll also show you three different setups. We're going to use their most basic setup. It's called the direct connection to compass. If you want GPS and other things, you'll use one of these other setups. This is a summary of the main parts you're going to need. So for example, the main brain is the processor unit, FAP7002. These are all Furuno parts for the most part. The Furuno heading sensor, part PG700. The Furuno rudder reference unit, part FAP6112. And then the control unit is the interface that you use on your dash. We have two because we have one up on our fly bridge. That's part FAP7011. And then I'll show you later on, there's what's called a tiller arm that you attach to your rudder post. I use the Buck Algonquin split head bronze, 1.5 inch shaft, 15.5 inches long. It has a 3/8 keyway, which I didn't use. And then lastly from Furuno, also the Furuno AccuSteer linear actuator. It's a 9-inch ram with a 12-volt pump. So those are the parts. One of the first things you need to do is figure out where you will locate the processor unit. It's the brain of the Autopilot. Beneath our helm seat, we've got room down here, and so that's the processor unit there. The manual will outline how much clearance on either side and on the top and in the back you have to have. So do pay attention to that and make sure you're locating in a place that is not too cramped. In the back of your installation manual, it's page D9. There's a detailed diagram of how much clearance you've got to give that processor unit. On page 2.1 of the manual, there's also a detailed diagram that shows you what connections you make to that processor unit. And then that informational sheet that they give you has a detailed section here that shows you what's attached, what you connect to which settings on the back of that processor unit. Also, page 2.2 of the manual has a good diagram of the connections. Okay, the next thing you need to figure out location for is what's called the integrated heading sensor. It's got its own manual, but also the main manual covers it. And this is the compass for the Autopilot. The manual has very specific instructions on where you should locate this. It's got to be as low as possible in the boat. It cannot be near an engine or an anchor chain, things like that. There's also a test procedure once you've got power to it that you can determine if it meets the requirements. In other words, if there's no metal that's going to interfere with its operation. And you can mount it a couple of ways. I mounted it on this bulkhead, as you can see, but you can also mount it on a flat surface. It's got a bracket beneath it that it attaches to. And as you can also see, it's got two cables, the ground wire and then the main cable that go to it. The next thing you need to do is figure out where you want to locate what they call the control unit. So we've got two. We've got one down here in the lower helm station, another one up above on the fly bridge. And page D7 of the manual, of the main manual, has a very detailed page that you'll either cut a 90mm hole or a 95mm hole, depending upon the thickness of what you're mounting it in. So pay close attention to this. It also explains that there's a ring on the back that you screw into position, and then there's a locking mechanism here that allows you to lock that ring. So pay attention to page D7. This is a view of the back side of the control unit. It's got the main cable going to it, and then there's a termination connector on the other terminal, unless you're using it for something. We weren't, so be sure if you're not using it to put this termination connector on there. And then lastly, you can see that ground wire there. The next thing you'll install is the linear actuator or the hydraulic ram. Again, you bought this from Furuno. They did not supply the manual for it, so I got that from C-Star, the manufacturer. And then also purchased from Furuno was the hydraulic pump. It's produced by AccuSteer, and again, Furuno did not supply a manual, so I contacted AccuSteer and got the manual. Okay, this is the hydraulic ram or the linear actuator. It attaches to a tiller arm that's mounted to your rudder post. And this thing needs to be very, very securely mounted. I've got 5 lag bolts that go down to this beam here, or frame. This is a piece of white oak that I glued and then attached with those 5 lag bolts. And I've also got a stainless steel plate here, 1/4 inch, that I attached the mounting bracket to for this. So make sure it's very, very securely mounted, because it puts out a lot of power. And this is the hydraulic pump for the linear actuator. It's connected to the linear actuator with these hoses. And it's best, if you can, to mount this above the linear actuator, because when it comes time to bleed this, it'll be much easier if this is above the linear actuator. So I had this stainless steel bracket fabricated that I attached this to, and so far it seems to work very well. This is the tiller arm that you'll attach to your rudder post. This is our rudder post here. And then your linear actuator attaches to that. You've also got to make sure when you mount this linear actuator that it lines up with the tiller arm. You don't want it too high or too low for attaching to that tiller arm. Let me explain a few things on this tiller arm. It came with bronze bolts and nuts. I would suggest that you replace those with grade 8 steel bolts, coat them with grease before you install them, so that they don't rust easily. And then also, most people they through bolt this. So I have a 3/16 clevis pin that goes through the rudder shaft and this tiller arm. You put a huge amount of torque on these nuts. So if you just use stainless steel or bronze, they will gall. I already experienced that. So use grade 8 bolts and nuts on this. Here's the trick on installing that clevis pin, or drilling the hole accurately. First thing you do is get a piece of material. This is 1.5 inch aluminum, same diameter as our rudder shaft. And very precisely on your drill press at home, drill a hole right down the very center of it. And then you'll disassemble this, and with this piece here, this removable piece, you can then drill a guide hole in this that you will then, when you come down to the boat, you'll attach this, and then you will drill through this hole here that you pre-drilled at home using that aluminum sample. And it came out just perfectly. I can't show you very easily on the back side, but the back side of this clevis pin came out just perfectly in the other piece of the tiller arm. Okay, the last step in this installation is this rudder reference unit. It connects to the tiller arm, and it will mirror the movement of the tiller arm as the Autopilot linear actuator moves the rudder post through this tiller arm. So this is probably the most critical piece of installation in this whole setup. It's very, very important that you do this correctly. And the trick is to use the manual, page D11. You've got to make sure that the attachment point on that tiller arm, this outer hole is 110 millimeters. You've got to make sure that the attachment point on the tiller arm is 110 millimeters. These two short sides of this rectangle have to be the exact same length. And then this threaded rod that also connects to the tiller arm, that has to be the exact same distance from the center of your rudder reference unit to the center of the rudder post. So you've got to have the long sides be the exact same length and the short sides be the exact same length. And when you're in a neutral helm position, centered helm, all four corners have to be 90 degrees. This is really, really important. So make sure you do this properly. If it wasn't obvious, the purpose of this rudder reference unit is to mirror the movement of your rudder. So that's its purpose. It gives that information to the processor unit. Okay, there are two final steps in this stuff. You've got to do what they call a dockside setup. Once you've got everything installed, setting certain parameters on the computer, and the manual will walk you through it, and then a sea trial out on the water. I chose to hire a Furuno technician to do both of these. It was a couple hours of his time, and it was well worth the money. As I said, it's a great working unit. Any adjustments you want to make, you just turn this knob a few clicks and it adjusts the heading. It works very, very subtly and smoothly, not at all jerky like our old 50-year-old Autopilot that we removed to install this. Anyway, good luck on the job. You'll enjoy having it.